Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership Forum, a space where you will hear perspectives from global industry executives on human ingenuity and how they catalyzed it to unlock value and realize their organization's true potential. We will keep it real. We will hear what's worked well and learnings from instances where things could have worked better. I'm your host, Saquib, Vali, partner at SpyderWorks and explorer. Say hi to the future, the fast growing community highlighting the human side of ingenuity. Our guest today is Jeff King, CEO at Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, an executive with a career showcased by an outstanding record of management performance, staff and business development and achievement, natural and composed leader, strategic thinker and planner, and high impact change agent. Most of all, Jeff is a deal maker with countless awards from Canada emanate today. Welcome, Jeff, and thank you for taking time out from your deal making schedule.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Saquib. I'm excited to be on the show.
So, Jeff, so far I've introduced you in how one would read your profile, but would love it if you could let our listeners hear in your voice how you wish to introduce yourself to them. And as you do, please do demystify for our audience what we may all get wrong about deal making as a skill on the one end, and then what's the role of real estate boards?
Okay.
What are they? What their mandate is? Just throw some light on that. So Please take it away.
Okay. All right. So starting off with the sort of the micro sense on myself, I think that's a very flattering description of me. I like to see myself as a bit of a futurist and trying to take a strategic view of where industries are going. I spent my career really in three different stages. First stage in reinsurance. The largest portion was in entertainment and music rights and intellectual property. About 20 years in that, to be honest. And then the last couple of years, I've been in real estate at the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, as you mentioned. The deal making, most of that activity happened when I was in the intellectual property space, and it was acquiring other companies that did similar things. Most of them outside of Canada, but had different types of relationships. But a lot of it was towards a view towards incremental growth and leveraging. The way I look at it, it's almost like the old Reese's peanut butter cup ads. And you've got a peanut butter factory, I've got a chocolate factory. Together, we can make something new and different that has a value add. And I think that was a big part of how the mergers and acquisitions work was so successful and worked so well for myself and my previous employer. On terms of making deals, the one thing that I'm a very people-focused person, and I really sort of I think people really have to see what's in it for them. And I think a big part that sometimes people will lose track of is that if there's 12 items that you're working on a deal, or on development of a strategy or a new arrangement or whatever it is, if there's 12 items, you don't have to win 100% on all 12 of them, because you want to have a chance for the other person to have some wins and feel good about the deal as well. It's not about just being a tough negotiator. It's about finding common ground and moving the needle forward. I've been fortunate to have a lot of good success with that and worked with some really great partners around that front, including during my time at the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver with this type of mentality. And I find it's much more proactive and well received. And I kind of think it fits well with the sensitivities of the current world. COVID taught us, we are all vulnerable, we're all exposed. And I think there's opportunities here that we can maybe reimagine how business gets done. So I think those are all important and key features. Now, real estate boards, what do they do? That's a good question. So there's two or three main things that they do. First and foremost is the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver runs the multiple listing service for most of the lower mainland of British Columbia, along with the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board, who handles the Fraser Valley area. The multiple listing service allows the realtors to promote homes for sale, and of course allows the public to take a look through realtor.ca and other venues to see what properties are available and do some online research, things like that. That's a huge portion of what our activities are. We also do some government relations and advocacy work, both in terms of affordable housing and some progress that we'd like to see around buyers' rights and the evolution of the deal of real estate. And then there's also work around training and education and professional development. specifically really zeroed in on the managing brokers and the realtors themselves. Everything from ethics to contracts to new technologies and how to manage their business a little bit better and help them to be stronger and more successful. The RevGV, Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, has a little bit over 15,000 realtors as members and is one of the largest boards in the country. The largest is Toronto, and Vancouver's second largest, neck and neck with Quebec, depending on how you measure it in terms of dollars or number of deals. Just to give you some sense of scale, there's about 35 to 40,000 deals a year, and they represent around $40 billion.
Wow.
So it's a sizable, footprint. But I think there's a transformation that's starting to happen in the industry. And to me, it kind of feels like the way music did in the late 90s, early 2000s. And for the music industry at that time, the internet was here, but things like Napster and LimeWire and Kazaa and YouTube and Netflix and streaming services weren't around yet, but people knew they were coming. And eventually they came. And some of the music company, the rights holders, really leaned in and adapted well and dealt with that and prepared themselves for this future state. Other ones disappeared, frankly, and some of the names of, that were household names in the 70s and 80s, and we all, the 12 CDs for a penny and all that type of stuff, all those things disappeared. But some companies really leaned in and adapted to the technological changes and did quite well, and including the place where I worked, and I was fortunate enough to be a big part of that. And when I look at what's going on with real estate, I can see similar parallels starting to emerge. The rise of Web 3.0 really allowing more complex transactions online and through digital processes, like we call it a digital deal room, really, is creating new opportunities around different things along those types of scenarios, not unlike what companies like the record labels and publishers and performing rights organizations were dealing with 20 years ago. Much smaller number of deals, tens of thousands, not hundreds of billions, but multi-million dollar transactions, of course, not fractions of a penny. But it's interesting, and the thing that keeps resonating in the back of my mind as this is happening is that the consumer is undefeated. The consumer will find ways to get either data or information, and there's almost certainly since the birth of the internet, there's been a relentless push to have intermediaries out of the mix, and travel agents and insurance brokers and other folks and stockbrokers were mainstays for generations. Were slowly picked apart and repurposed into a different way. Doesn't mean they don't exist now, but they moved into a different area, and I can sort of see similar types of things happening with financial institutions, legal professions, the rise of AI, different things like that, and that will all have an impact on real estate and how real estate's transacted. So the real estate boards can have a good role in helping with that.
This is fascinating, and yes, we all are experiencing this every single day, but it's not every day that I get someone like the Jeff King give me perspective like you just did. So thanks. I'm just curious. So would the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, is it in the end, is it on the consumer side or is it on the broker side? How would you think about the mandate? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So our members are the brokers and the realtors, and they pay monthly dues and they pay fees per transaction on MLS. But the public is a key stakeholder, right? So a big part of what I'm wanting to bring to the entire transaction is increasing the transparency and trust in in all aspects of the real estate deal, and the buyers and sellers. The people looking to buy the home. We're largely focused on residential. The people looking to buy the home or sell the home are fundamental in our conversations about how we structure this to do it. I'm convinced that the way the deals will look will be different, Saquib, over the coming years. And by the time we get to 2030, it's going to be dramatically different. But I still think that a person will still be in the middle of it. And the key view in my mind, my vision, is that a realtor will be that Sherpa. They'll help the person. They're not going to buy the mountain, but they're going to help you climb it, and you're
Sure.
going to do the transaction, all the rest of it. The similar process around commercial and office real estate, but those are slightly different because the nature of the buyers and sellers are usually a bit more sophisticated. There's other factors at play, but a lot of our focus is around the realtors themselves, people facilitating the transactions, but with a mind towards the general public and ensuring that there's trust in the ecosystem.
Helpful, very helpful. Now, I have, my mind right now is racing in sort of two areas that I definitely want your point of view on. And then we'll get into the meat of the conversation of what we're here to talk about. But so the two issues, one is very topical and the other one is very real. The one that's topical is just all the wildfires that are going through right now, BC, which is horrible, and it's tragic and all that, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure, and it's also displacing people. It's also, does the real estate board have a thought how it goes about? Does it have a say?
Well, obviously the fires themselves are devastating, and are extremely traumatic. And in full candor, I have a huge personal sensitivity around fires and such. I lost a parent to a house fire many years ago. It's foremost in my mind almost on a daily basis. And when I see, oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then when you see the devastation that's happened in Maui and in the interior of British Columbia and in the Yukon and in Eastern Canada, it boggles the mind about the devastation and the horror. On the brass tacks of it, the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver has given towards the Red Cross efforts, has given financially towards it, and we're very proud of the work we do around the Realtors Care program, which is a fundraising program that realtors do annually, either to help different social causes or help with homelessness and different things like that. It hasn't been decided yet for this year, but I'm sure that the fires and the displacement around that, the various real estate boards, of which the Vancouver one's the largest one in BC, will have will undoubtedly be quite active in that space.
Okay.
But as far as fighting the fires and such,
no, absolutely,
yeah.
no, I understand.
Yeah.
I think I was more about on the one end, it's people getting displaced, so that's one side of it, and the other side is at some point in time we need to think about rebuilding and getting them back into homes. So I'm sure there's there. And then obviously the second topic, which is very very close to a conversation that's happening in many different places, not just in Vancouver, but which is all around affordable housing. Like I can tell you, Jeff, I don't think my 20-year-old will be able to afford a down payment at any given point in time. I don't think my 13-year-old will, as she gets into the workforce, will be able to do that unless there's help from the parents. So how are we thinking about that?
Yeah, it's a complex issue, and for every buyer, there's a seller who's viewing the home as an investment nest egg and a retirement plan or a program to get children through college or university and all those elements. But affordable housing, and coincidentally, I'm in Toronto as we record this, but affordable housing, particularly in Vancouver and Toronto, are major issues. These are expensive markets, certainly in Canada, and even globally are rising in profile in terms of the challenges in affording houses, especially the down payment part. That's a challenging piece because people are relying on the bank of mom and dad to help finance this stuff. I think there's two or three elements to it, and they're related, but not directly. The rise of homelessness, particularly in Vancouver, is quite alarming. And I think that there's some broad things as a society that we should be looking to do about how to handle and deal with those things. Some of the Scandinavian countries are working on making housing a human right in their constitutions. It does not exist in the Canadian Constitution at this time, but it is in some legislation, and some provinces are considering it, and it is in some federal legislation, but it's not enshrined as healthcare or education or other things like that. And I do think there's a bigger picture opportunity there, which would start to shift some of the conversations around it. And so that's one aspect about the underhoused folks that I think is a major concern for people. But more to your point, the key element around the younger generation, people born after 2000, will they ever own a home, or what will home ownership look like? I do think new models will continue to emerge. Neo banking, not to be confused with neo credit card, but neo banking, where tech companies are working with banking partners to come up with different models, and things like fractional home ownership, I think, are likely to rise. They're currently not really available in Canada, but they are operating in other jurisdictions globally. I think those things will start to arise. And another factor is the general overall economy of Canada. We're about to see over the next 12 to 15 years the largest transfer of generational wealth in human history.
Sure.
It's going to be particularly noticeable in Western Europe and North America, as our parents and grandparents move on, or their requirements change, all the rest of it. That'll have a dynamic flow of what's going on and with the different issues. Having said that, the Canada is taking a strategic view towards growing our population to bring in skilled workers and to accelerate against what's a declining birth rate. About, give or take a bit, rough numbers here, about 500,000 immigrants are coming to Canada annually, give or take a bit, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little more, but that's generally the plan for the next few years. About 300,000 of them end up in Southern Ontario, about 100,000 end up in Southern British Columbia, and the rest are kind of sprinkled around the rest of the country. Those people have to live somewhere. And that's causing different pressure. They're not going in and buying $10 million homes, but they're adding pressure. They have to live someplace, and that's putting pressure on starter homes, condominiums, other things like that. So there needs to be an opportunity to increase the supply of homes, particularly at the what used to be called the entry level, the starter home type thing, and at the more the front end piece of it, including rentals. And there's been a number of moves afoot to try to accelerate the process around the approval process from the large municipalities. It's very slow right now, to be honest. And we've been doing a lot of advocacy work and working with the city of Vancouver and the municipalities. There's about 23 municipalities within our catchment. Vancouver is the largest one, of course, but everything from Whistler to Port Coquitlam. And Vancouver, we've been working with the local governments and the First Nations around different ways to accelerate the approval process, going from a thought to actual occupancy, taking 7 years for an apartment building to go up, is probably unacceptable. That's a long process, and it's resulting in such a supply crunch. And the demand is high, and we're adding in the immigration, particularly in 2 regions in the country. It's creating a lot of economic pressure. And generally, Canada operates as a regulated free market, but it's putting a lot of pressure on the sort of supply and demand elements of it. Which is why, despite rising interest rates, prices really haven't collapsed like people thought they would have, because the demand is so strong and the supply is so limited. So for your sons, it's a concern. And so, new models, new ways of looking at it, increased supply, and then maybe other different approaches. Rentals is increasing rapidly. That could be an angle to do it. And I think a different role of the national banks and other financial institutions may help to change some of these different models.
So Jeff, I mean, reason for introducing these 2 specific, what we would call dilemmas, right? Mm-hmm. These are not problems, because problems have a solution. Dilemmas are complicated, they're complex, they're nuances, mm-hmm. And there's lots to be. And that's exactly the framework that we follow for this particular platform we have, which is Say Hi to the Future, where HI stands for human ingenuity. Mm-hmm. And the entire intent there is to catalyze a conversation so we can start nurturing and cultivating the human side of ingenuity, right? Mm-hmm. And so go back into your experience, either during the time when you were in the music industry, insurance industry, or for that matter, currently in the real estate board. give us some thoughts on what's your leadership take on the human side of ingenuity. How do you cultivate it? How do you unleash it in your organization? Um, when has it worked really well? When it hasn't, and what have you learned from it?
Okay, yeah. So that's a very broad, wide reaching query. Um, uh, in the grand macro sense of people want to consume music or watch TV when they want to, or want to binge watch shows, which I was actively involved in those types of things. A lot of it was tied around everything from bandwidth and technological abilities, like phones having screens and things like that. And then as those things started to go, the idea of having licensing regimes to deal with it became more and more important. And the human ingenuity around that was to look at things differently than what had been done in the 100 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
For real estate, it's very similar. Real estate's a very conservative industry. It has not changed a lot in the last 100 years or so, other than putting the old MLS, multiple listing service, the old MLS binders online. Much of the industry is very similar to what it was when our parents bought homes in the 70s or 60s or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we're starting to see things not just around the deal itself, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but new elements around human ingenuity, about new ways of dealing with things. New business models that we just chatted about is one of them. But even things like laneway houses, or the small houses that are in back at the end of the lot, under 1,000 square feet typically, things like that, can add a lot of capacity, a lot of supply to it. I think that can be an ingenious way to help deal with some of the supply issues in a very timely way. And a lot of these, for instance, a lot of these smaller homes can be 3D printed and prepared quite rapidly. You need to have appropriate approval and all the rest of it, of course. But with that, I see that as an opportunity to open up a bit of a pipeline to help deal with some of these issues, and really using human ingenuity to help deal with it. I was speaking with some
So
folks this morning. That's what they're looking at doing in Hawaii for Lahane,
yeah,
3D
yeah.
printed homes, and try to accelerate something to replace what's there in record time.
And I don't mean to make light of the situation, but you're absolutely right. A crisis generally precipitates um,
Yeah.
doing something very differently. And the two crises that we spoke about, which are close to home, one is affordable housing, and the other is all the wildfires that are raging right now.
Hmm.
I think that in itself. So let me ask you this slightly differently, which is today, if you want these new ingenious thoughts, ideas executed,
Hmm.
how are you going about? How is that different from what Jeff would have done as regular running of an operation?
Yeah. So, and that's a great segue. And we didn't plan this on purpose, but that's a great segue because it brings it back into sort of the micro. How do we operate our businesses, right? And
Yeah.
as a leader, I really want to try to challenge the status quo and say, why do we do it this way? We've all heard the stories about people who cut off the ends of roast beef, and they ask the mother, well, that's the way grandma did it, and that's the way great grandma did it, and they find out great great grandma did it because she had a little tiny stove or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the people fall into these types of things. So I love challenging the status quo, and I like encouraging staff to do that, including affording them appropriate time to do it, and recognizing that sometimes things will not work out. Sometimes a clever, creative idea just isn't quite there yet, or is too early, or not ready, or just doesn't work. And you have to accept that that's there, because perfection is the enemy of progress. And if you try to get things
Mhm.
to perfection, you're not going to progress, and you're not going to be able to deal with this. And that includes the big, giant economic things that we're just talking about, but also includes management of small teams or individual projects. If you try to get something to perfect, or if you don't give people an appropriate amount of time to be able to work on different things, you're not going to get that innovation and that creativity. They're going to be head down, trying to just organize themselves. So at RevGV, at the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, we've been putting a lot of effort into doing what I call kind of air traffic control, so that we're managing the workflow properly. We have the planes coming in at the right time, the right people on them, and they're fueled properly for the next thing to go off, so we can organize ourselves well, including having windows of time to do creative thought, to look at different models, to talk to different look at different uses of technology, to look at what other industries have done to solve different things, um, that's been another learning, right? I moved from I was in my 50s. I moved from one city and one industry to another city and another industry. And I thought, oh boy, I hope this goes. And it's been reaffirming and exciting. A lot of differences, but a lot of similarities and a lot of opportunities around just using that brain power. I'm a firm believer if the head and heart. If someone's smart and willing to work hard, they can accomplish anything.
And so, Jeff, I completely get that, and it's because I know when we've had our different conversations. Now that is your mindset, and I'm completely convinced of that. Like I know, and I've experienced it. What are some of the challenges you face when you're trying to make something like that, happen? And how do you overcome them? What comes in the way?
There's a couple of things that come in the way. Sometimes can be inertia. Some companies or some individuals can just be comfortable the way it is, or they're nervous, or they're afraid of change. And those are challenges, and you have to instill the confidence and have folks feel comfortable that you're going to have your back. But I have another sort of saying I believe in. It sounds a little rough, but I do believe in it. You work with people. Some people aren't innovative, and it's just not in their DNA. And there's a role for those folks, different ways of doing things. And you want to have caretakers. You want to have things that keep things going. But for other elements, you need to have that sort of change mindset and be able to evolve and move with things, right? Darwin. A lot of people misquote Darwin and say, oh, the biggest survivor ever. No, the ones who adapt are the ones that survive. And I find that some people, if you can't change the people, you have to change the people. And sometimes those are tough conversations, and I've learned as a young executive, getting the right people on the bus was really good and really smart. I was too arrogant, and I underestimated the impact the wrong people on the bus had. I always thought I can talk them into it. They'll figure it out. Sometimes they just don't. And then that ends up being a bit of a challenge because they become distracting to other passengers or to the bus driver and those types of things. So you want to have it where people can personalize it and see it. The old adage, people hate change, I think is not true. If I told you at the end of our interview here, you're going to get a winning lottery ticket, and you're going to win the Powerball or something like that, that's a monumental change. You're not going to hate it. You might not like the output. You might have trouble with all the people come out of the woodwork looking for money, but you'll take that challenge, right? But that's a change.
Oh, for sure.
Right. But human nature, through years of millennia of evolution, change is often viewed as a scary thing, and so negative news gets front and center. Change is bad. That rustling in the bushes could be a lion, so let's be afraid of things. We have to become more confident around that.
And you know what? I just looked at my watch. Oh my God, Sonia is giving me all sorts of indications. Boy, this half hour has gone fast. But thank you so much. Hey, before we let you go, just a couple of very quick ones. So, if Jeff was to live his life all over again, knowing what he knows today, what would you change?
I would spend more time with my parents as an adult.
All right.
You only have a certain amount of time with them, and then it's over.
I can't believe I mentioned
my parents twice in one podcast.
Hey, listen, it just shows what sort of an upbringing you've had. So fantastic. Yeah. What is one advice you'd like to give to all other leaders?
Really know what your why is, why you're doing things, and what your sort of the value proposition, what you bring to your employees and to your customers, and all the rest of it. And then there's two other sort of three little bits I'll give, and I'm mindful of time. One is, everyone talks about the elevator pitch, right? And have a good elevator pitch, be able to explain it in 7 minutes. To be honest, Saquib, I like the escalator pitch. If you and I are passing each other on an escalator, I've got 7 seconds to get your attention. Hey, what do you do? Why should I do business with you? Because I think we live in a world now where you need to have that type of connectivity, and it helps the thought process for you. Like, how do you describe your podcast or your consulting business or the real estate board or whatever it is, right? So I think we should move beyond the elevator pitch and move to escalator pitch and be thinking along those terms. And then the final one, and I ask this question a lot, both when I'm interviewing people to hire or when I'm looking for roles myself. I ask people if resources were unlimited and I was able to give you a magic wand right now, what would you change about your organization or your life? It is amazing some of the answers that I get back, and sometimes that it shows tremendously what their thought process is and what they're focused on. Some people have been very inspirational. Some people have been very strategic. Some people have been deer in the headlights. But I encourage you and your podcast community and such to maybe give some thought to that, and to ask your coworkers and ask your leaders in your company, hey, yeah, if you had a magic wand, what would you change here? And I think it could be quite telling.
I'm sure it will be. It will be. Jeff, this kind of rounds us out, but before we get to the exit of this, can you, because I've done all the questions and asking. I'm sure when Jeff came onto this platform, there might have been something on your mind that you wish to communicate to our viewers. Is there something that I never got to that you really wanted to speak to our audience in terms of how they could be better human beings, better professionals, better individuals in bringing new ideas to market?
You know what? You ask great questions and they're very broad. I'm going to distill this one down into a very specific focus. There's a speed of sound and a speed of light. I think there's a speed of business. And I think a lot of businesses struggle with going at the pace and being decisive enough and confident enough to move towards the evolution and leaning on that human ingenuity. Here's how we're going to do it. I run into it over and over and over again, almost daily. And I think that'd be an area. And if I've ever invited back, I'd be happy to talk to you about that, about legacy industries, some who've really adapted well, and some who have not. But I think the speed of business is another element I would love to impart on yourself and the community.
That is absolutely
about that.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely fantastic. One, you are welcome to come back on whenever you have time for us. Okay. It's been an honor to have you with us, Jeff. Our listeners would love to hear from you. We will tag you in our show notes and also the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver. And if people want to reach out to you, we will do so. We will make sure that we tag you. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. I have no idea how time flew because the conversation was so interesting.
Good. I'm glad. I definitely enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I'm honored to have been here and part of this august community.
The Say Hi to the Future podcast series is produced by Sonia Romero, edited by Matt Miller, and special effects by Edward Vasquez. Please leave us your thoughts and let us know if there's a guest you want us to have a conversation with. You can find all Say Hi to the Future podcast series on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.